There you go. Welcome. Isabel Bradburn Jackson and Jennifer Bulbrook are putting together this docu-series Lost Souls Initiative, where we're taking people's stories and sharing them with the world. Stories from those who are currently suffering and those who are getting the help, and those who have loved ones that are suffering and those who have loved ones that have passed. Today, I'm going to be actually sharing my own journey with all of you. So I guess, like, where do I begin?
Yeah, where do you begin? Where does it start for you?
Well, even though I know my past really has no control over me currently, but for the longest time, I felt like it did. And so I guess my best bet is to kind of start from the beginning, which I would have to say is really when I was just a little girl, like maybe grade 2. And I'm saying that because I guess for the longest time, even though I don't feel like this situation has affected me or has caused my mental health issues, the doctors and some family was really certain it did. And so what happened was I'm gonna say grade 2, a family friend had stayed over, and she was young as well, maybe 13 or something. And I remember her staying in the room with me, and she molested me. And this happened night after night, where she would, go down on me and that, and then she wanted me to do the same with her. And I hadn't told anybody about what had happened, but I definitely, now I look back at it, I noticed that that's probably when I really began to explore boys and really get into boys, and my kind of, I wouldn't say obsession, but my focus was really on getting attention from others. And
In a sexual manner.
yeah, in a sexual manner. And I don't even think it was just with boys. Like, I think it was with everybody. But I think back then it was easier with boys. And I remember 2 boys in particular. We lived in a townhouse survey, and the park in the townhouse was kind of off. And there was like a little area where it was really dark and that. And me and these 2 boys would go and play truth or dare. And they were a little bit older than I was. Maybe just a couple years older, a few years older. It's hard for me to remember. To me, when I look back, it was like they were like, I can see like I was grade 2 and they looked like 16, but I don't think they were that older. But it was like play truth or dare time and time again. And I think that's where all of that really began. And then just really me kind of really acting out. I started smoking cigarettes. I remember telling my brother to tell my mom to go fuck herself because she told my brother to come in from the park. It was late, it was dark out, and I wasn't even at the park with anyone. I was by myself, and I think I was actually waiting for the boys. And so, yeah, and so I think like now looking back at it, is if I really had to like talk about how I behaved and stuff to a therapist or that, they would probably diagnose me with like oppositional defiant disorder or some shit like that and put me on medication, when really it was because I was at the time having all of these thoughts and feelings that I wasn't processing. And at the time I was believing it was, these situations that were creating me to feel all these feelings, and really they were just triggering the thoughts, right? But they weren't really so much things for me to blame. But
and like the molestation, I think brings on a curiosity when you're that young, right? And then you see, oh, I'm getting attention from this, so then it perpetuates from there.
yeah, and I literally had my first orgasm like with her, and at that age, and that gives you that, that hit, like it's a physical thing, and then you start to kind of crave it because it was like, whoa, right? And then what would happen is I would crave it, and then with her the next day I would like, I wouldn't say I wanted it, but I didn't like I would try to pretend I was asleep. That never really worked. And then while it was happening, it was like, yay, but then it would feel so dirty afterward.
After.
I didn't want it to happen. During it, it
Mhm.
just was like, yay, because it was the physical thing. And then afterwards, I just felt dirty and felt like, well, maybe I did want it because that's how my body reacted.
Yeah. But that's it's how your body is made up, right? Like that's why men who are molested have such a hard like time with it too, and they're like, am I gay because my body reacted to these things? You know what I mean? But it's not. It's your body reacting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
for sure. Right. And like, and this stuff wasn't really talked about, right? It's still not really talked about.
no.
Like, you don't really hear about this stuff. It's you more or less hear people talk about it if it's happened to them or in their family, and then maybe they'll talk about it a little more freely. But for the most part, it's not really talked about. And
And
so it's hard
it's
for me to,
rarely talked about between a young girl and another young girl.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
usually like a young girl and an older cousin, or a young girl and an uncle, or, you know?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like, and that was another thing. It was like I always had it where, she was like maybe 13, like, like I always think, was she 13? Was she 16? Like I can't even remember exactly. Was she 9? But
Yeah,
I just remember thinking like for her to be even doing that at any of those ages, something had to have happened to her.
absolutely.
And so I
Absolutely.
always kind of never ever really blamed her or had a lot of anger or anything towards her. And I
Mhm.
think that's where I've just kind of always had and looked at it from more of a curiosity and a compassion type of thing when it came to her. And
Mhm.
I think that's where my big heart kind of opened up throughout the years. And that's where now I sometimes struggle with like what's too much and what's not enough. And
Mhm.
so like going back to
Well,
like
the
then,
boundaries, right?
yeah, exactly. Right. And it's like even going back to like when I was younger, like we ended up moving and from that townhouse into another one. And I remember like running away and going back to the previous townhouse, right? And it was over stupid like shit, it was my brother's birthday and I couldn't open a present or something. It was something so stupid. It was like, well, first chance I got, right? Like I was out of there. I was going to where, and it was like I said, like they would have probably definitely have diagnosed me with like oppositional defiant disorder or
Mhm.
something,
Defiant disorder, yeah, for sure.
like even when later down the road when I did start to get therapy, they definitely were blaming things like my dad. Like for example, my dad, I grew up with a lot of illnesses and deaths
Yeah.
around my family. Like my dad, for the longest time, he worked for the Hamilton AIDS Network, the Ontario AIDS Network, the Hemophilia Society. And with that, it's, a lot of, sickness, right? But back then it was never really talked about.
Mhm.
But my dad started to talk about it more. And in the family, there was a lot of funerals, there was a lot of death, or at least I felt like there was a lot of death and funerals around. I just really remember going to one, which was my grandma's, but I
Yeah.
just remember just having a lot of sadness around growing up. And I just remember going and later on in life going through like this like never wanting to leave my room and just feeling lonely and like we moved in a few times and I just always kind of felt like I didn't really belong, and the doctors and that always wanted to blame my dad being sick. Like it was
Mhm.
always like they tried to always blame it on the fact that my dad had HIV positive and hep C, and that's why I was behaving the way I was. This is why I was feeling the way I was. And I never felt like that was the reason. And at
Mhm.
this time, not I didn't hadn't really opened up about the molestation or that, but I
Mhm.
never really opened it up because I never thought that was the reason either. I felt like it was more of the current situation I was in because I was now in like later in middle school and in early high school, and I felt like I just never belonged. And you know how like kids are, like they talk about you, and
Yeah.
it's just bullying and all those kind of things. And with my dad being so open about the HIV and him having it,
Mhm.
I got ridiculed a lot. There was,
Of course.
I remember a girl saying, at least my dad didn't get AIDS from sleeping with a hooker. And I'm like, that's not even how he got it. But like, that made me mad. I remember going after her. And it was like I was in grade 7 or something. And
Mhm.
like, there was times where like we found like signs on her, like front lawn, like Bulbrook has
Yeah.
AIDS. And like our one neighbor like kicked our dog in the head. And like there was just so many different things that
Yeah,
had
because there was so much stigma around AIDS back
so
then,
much.
right? Like
Yeah.
back then it was like a predominantly gay disease, remember?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was, and my dad was always, he always asked before he wrote an article or that about us or about him, it was okay with us. Like he never ever
Mhm.
wanted to put an article out there that we were uncomfortable with. And I always stood proud and was like, you do what you got to do, Dad. Like, absolutely, do it. But at the same time, it did come with bullying. And
Mhm.
I remember, people thinking like, I had it, and it was just different rumors that would go around, and then just people thinking like I was easy, and like those type of rumors that would go around, and then it got to the point where I ended up being easy. Like I ended up drinking like I would drink, and like the alcohol, the addiction started,
Yeah.
and so I guess with me, my mental health always seemed to be an issue, but I never really knew what to really blame it on, except like I was blaming it on more or less being bullied. And the doctors wanted to blame it on my dad. And then once they found out about the molestation, they wanted to blame it on that. And I was so against blaming it on that. I didn't want to blame it on any of those things. I
Mhm.
was so like, let's blame it on the bullying. And then I just couldn't take control of that because like I can't control how other people treat me. And
Mhm.
it just got like I felt like I didn't matter, and I felt like I was nobody, and I felt like people would be easier to have me not around. I used to like cut myself a lot, and I would take a lot of pills to literally try to kill myself, where like I became in like I'd have seizures and shit. And my mom, like, would I wake up? Would I not? Like it got,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I didn't stop trying to kill myself because I thought I would succeed. I was so afraid that I would not succeed that I stopped because I was afraid that I wouldn't succeed and I would end up worse than I already was, like with not
Mhm.
being able to move or something. Because that last time I tried, I got seizures, and I know what can happen. Like you could go into a vegetable state and all that kind of.
Mhm.
That's worse to me than what I am now. So I'm not going to even try to kill myself no more. I'm just going to continue hurting myself by cutting myself and drinking and drugs and sleeping around and everything else that you can possibly think of.
Mhm.
It was like
Yeah.
I was always afraid of was death, but that was the one thing I kept pushing myself towards. And so it was like so difficult, but it wasn't as hard to get help then than it is now.
No, now it's
Then
horrible now.
I was able to get into the hospital. I was be able to see psychiatrists, go to show.
Mhm.
Like I had psychiatrists and social workers and therapists. I had them all, and it didn't feel like I had to wait very long for any of my appointments. And I don't know like what the difference is from back then to now. And it wasn't like it was covered. It wasn't like my dad was all covered with all these like, and he was no, like there was a lot of times when my dad didn't even work because of his own illnesses. And so
Mhm.
it's like it was OHIP covered. If I talked to my mom about it, she said, yeah, OHIP covered and all that. But now it's like, what is OHIP covered? You have to wait sometimes years to get on.
Well, because they've cut so much funding now that there's very few
Yeah.
outreach programs. Like there's very few programs or community supports because of all of the funding cuts. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's absolutely crazy because I hear about people who go and see a psychiatrist or even trying to find one. And it's like I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have the supports of those
Mm-hmm.
available to me, even though I don't feel like they cured me or made me feel great, because they didn't, but they did help me keep going,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there was support out there, knowing that my dad and my mom that had my back,
Mm-hmm.
and that there was other supports out there, and being able to stay in the hospital for a little bit. Those things did help a bit, but they definitely didn't cure me, because
No, no.
blamed they always blame your problems on, let's take medication and let's blame some outside external factor for why you're feeling the way you are. And it wasn't until I learned about coaching and all that stuff, and learned that like I have a lot more control over my own life and over how I feel and my thoughts, that than I
Mm.
ever really knew. And that's because nobody ever taught me that. It
No.
took, me being 30 some odd years old and learning coaching to find out that, because, fucking Josie called me a bitch and said I'm a whore, doesn't mean that I need to feel bad like that.
Yeah.
Those are just words,
It's
right?
all about perspective, right? And about how you choose to react to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And once I started learning how to switch my thinking and my perspective and shit, then my depression really started to dwindle, and my anxiety, I got to more manage on my anxiety. My anxiety popped up probably more so in my late mid 20s, just before
Mm-hmm.
my dad passed away. It got really bad where I ended up in the psych ward, like in the emergency room, because it would get so bad. I would wake up with anxiety and go to bed with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then I literally, like, if I had to have a conversation or leave the house, it would like spike up
Mm-hmm.
galore. And back then I was smoking cigarettes, and I was smoking weed, and both of them made it worse. And I was
Yeah.
drinking, right, which made it
Mm-hmm.
worse. And so when you add all that onto it, you say, well, no, smoking weed helps you with your anxiety. No, it doesn't.
Not me.
Depending on the
Not
person,
me.
does not help it. It will heighten it. It will make
Mm-hmm.
it worse. For the longest time, I quit smoking weed because the anxiety I got, I couldn't, it was so scary because I was so
Yeah.
afraid to feel it. And I thought I was going to die, and I believed I was going to die, that it was horrible.
Yep.
But for some reason I could never kick drinking. Like, it was like drinking was my go-to. I drank to feel confident, I drank to be social, I drank to get away from the depression and to get away from the anxiety. And it just
Drank when you were happy, drank when you were sad, drank to
drank
celebrate,
all the
drank to
time.
blow off
Every
steam.
day was
Yeah.
an excuse to drink for
Yeah.
me. Like, every day. Even when I said I didn't want to drink, I'd end up drinking some way, somehow
Yeah.
during that day. And it took complete control over my life. And
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
remember being there for a bit of it. I wasn't there for all of it, but I saw a good part of where it really had control of you.
yeah, yeah,
You
I
didn't
didn't
want
do
to,
anything.
and you were still getting blackout drunk.
Yeah. And it was blackout drunk, like on a pretty much regular basis. It was,
Yeah.
I don't remember shit. And people say all the time, like, I don't understand, like, how you can, take someone home if they're blackout drunk, or I don't understand, you can do this if that person's blackout drunk, or how you can do that, and blah, blah, blah. But if people don't realize that, like, even me as a blackout drunk, if you looked at me, talked to me, I just look really drunk. I don't look like a blackout drunk. You wouldn't know
Hmm.
that I didn't know what I was doing until the next day, when I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I have no memory of that at all.
Or when you would ask me, "What did I do last night? Did I do anything stupid?" Remember?
Yeah,
I'd be
yeah,
like, "No, you were fine here." Like,
yeah. And that was a big one. Like, I always wake up in the morning. Did I do something stupid? Like, what did I say? And there was days where I just felt like, oh no, like it wasn't good whatever went down the night before.
hmm,
And it was so weird because I would drink to feel more confident and to show up. But then the next morning, when I would go to the bar where I have to show face, where I totally made a fool of myself the day before, I would
hmm,
go there, sober. And I was okay going there sober and be like, let's laugh it off. But meanwhile, I'm like dying inside. So let's drink some more.
hmm.
And it was just a routine for me. I remember working
Yeah.
in bars and being cut off. I was not allowed to drink in the bars I worked at ever. I wasn't even allowed to step foot into the bar. If I worked there, fine. If I'm off, I am not allowed to come there because my drinking was that bad. Same as at
Yeah.
home. You're not to drink. Like, no. I remember my parents had a bar and I literally would drink their entire bar to the point where they would have parties and they were like, yeah, this is water, guys. Like, what the hell's going on here? And then my
I
parents,
remember that. I remember you
parents
saying
would,
that.
yeah, and my parents replaced the bar and put it in their trunk of their car. And I still managed to then empty all of that too. And it was just, I just had, it felt like I had no control. And it
Mhm.
was like the alcohol had control. It was the situations in my life that had control. It was all of these other things that had control. It was the feelings I was feeling that had control. Like I didn't have control of my own feelings. And I think that's where a lot of people get lost because they don't realize that it's not the feelings, it's not the situations, it's not the alcohol that has the control over us. We have the control over all of that. It's just
Mhm.
right now we're choosing to do blah 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 with it instead of blah blah. So yeah,
I
like
don't
my,
think it was so much that you didn't have control back then. I think it's that you were running from reality. You were
yeah,
running from the pain. You were running from the embarrassment. You used to be super hard on yourself about everything. Um, so you were running from it. You didn't want to feel it. You didn't want to deal with it. You didn't want to see it. You didn't want to hear it. So if you were drinking, you didn't have to. You didn't have to deal with it
yeah.
because you were blackout.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was easier not to deal with it and to get blackout
Yeah.
drunk than to have to sit there with the anxiety and the thoughts. And really just, I would judge myself a lot. Like, I should do this, I
Hmm.
shouldn't do that. Like, why am I doing this? Why can't I do this? You know, and it's true. Like, I did have the control, but I was just choosing to use that control in a different way. And
Hmm.
so now that I've learned that, I try to learn it and just like I manage my drinking. I have my planned days. I haven't had like a bout with depression in a couple of years. My anxiety, like I'm doing things I never thought I would ever do, like getting on airplanes and stuff like that, like I've come like a long, long way, but unfortunately not a lot of people get to come where I'm at, you
But
know.
you're also taking time to take care of you, right? You're
Yeah.
nourishing your body really well. You're exercising, you're taking care of your body. You're going for walks, you're doing things that are, good for your mental health, the things that bring you joy, right? When you were trapped in that time, that season of your life, you weren't doing any of these things. You weren't eating well. You were rarely eating because you were always drinking. And you don't drink when you eat. You
Yeah.
don't. I don't know if everybody does it, but you don't drink when you eat. You
Yeah.
don't eat when you drink. So you really weren't taking care of yourself. You
Yeah.
didn't love yourself back then.
No, and I don't know how like I could even think I could love myself back then. Like I literally walked out on my family. Like I walked out on my mom, my kid, and everything at one point. And it was like it was being selfish. And I know it was being selfish and I know it was the best that I could do at the same time. And so I'm not like I don't judge myself for it now, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when I think about the fact that
Hmm.
like I wasn't there and stuff. But that took a long time for me to realize that and to not put all the blame on myself and realize like at the time I did the best that I could do. But at the time back then it was blame me and it was like a poor me, poor pity Jen situation on a regular basis because I became so accustomed to it. It
Hmm.
became so normal for me to feel like shit that anytime something kind of good happened in my life, I would run from that too because it was
Hmm.
uncomfortable for me to feel those happy, good feelings
Yeah, it
because
feels like a
I
setup.
barely ever felt them.
Feels like a setup.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just and it's like and like how do you feel it? Like how are you supposed to feel happy? Like I hadn't felt happy in so long. It's like when somebody gives you a compliment, how many people like you get a compliment and they're like, oh, like don't say that. Like, you know what I mean? That's because
Hmm.
we're not used to having compliments. We don't know. And like, because when somebody gives us a compliment, we're thinking, what are we thinking in that moment? I'm
Yeah.
usually thinking, back then I used to think you're lying, right? You're just having to
Yeah.
say that. You're just trying to get in my pants. Like it was some sort of thing. It was
Yeah.
never something that I even took true or real to what people say. Where now you give me a compliment, and whether you mean it or not, my mind says you do because I know I look good and I know I am good and whatever
Yeah.
else. That's all it
But
is to
that's the
it.
difference though. You love yourself now. You care about yourself now. You see all of the beauty that you possess now, you know? You
Yeah.
see all of the potential that you have now. You never did back then.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I just loved you through it and never judged you, because you judged you enough for both of us.
Yeah.
And I think when you left and you left Caleb with your parents, it wasn't you being selfish. It was you trying to like do them a favor because you knew you weren't right. You were fucking up. You know, in your eyes, you were just making things worse.
Yeah.
So he was better off with your parents, and you didn't want to stress your parents out with whatever it was you were going through. So you left. And
Yeah.
that's not a selfish thing. That's a noble thing. You put your parents and Caleb before yourself. And I
Yeah.
know at the time it felt selfish because that's the self talk, right? That's the
Yeah.
negative self talk. But like, it wasn't.
Yeah.
You really felt like in that moment that, like this is the best for them.
Yeah, and I did. And because even though I was there, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I was barely really around. And when I was around, I was hungover or felt like shit. And that was another thing, when you drink all the time, the next day, whether you're hungover in bed or just shaking or whatever, you're
Hmm.
not showing up as your best self, even if you think you
No.
are. I used to think, well, because I can go to work still and because I could get out of bed, like, oh, I'm good. Like I can still drink. Well, no, because I'm shaking like a leaf. I'm on edge. I'm moody. I'm snapping. I'm like, like that's not my best
Hmm.
self. And I deserve better than that. My kids deserve better than that. My clients, like everybody deserves better than that. But at the time, I just felt like I didn't deserve better than that. And so how do I give it to anybody else? I don't
Yeah.
feel like it. Right. And unfortunately, that's,
You got to the point where you were shaking? You were having the shakes?
oh yeah, I was shaking bad all the time. Yeah.
Wow, Jen, I
Yeah,
didn't know.
when I would go to work, and like for a draft, everybody would always comment all the time. People would comment all the time about my shakes. Yeah, like I would even get the shakes, and it would like if so I would go on these after I. What happened was you start with like I started with drugs really well drinking, and then I went to drugs, and then I went
Hmm.
back to drinking, and then I would drink like every day. And then I ended up going to the point where I was binge drinking. So I
Uh-huh.
would drink for like 4 days and I would stop for three, drink for six, stop for two. Like it was all over the place. But when I
Yeah.
stopped drinking, whether it was 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, I would shake the entire time. I would shake on
Wow.
day four as if it was day one. People are like, oh, you drank last night, eh? I'm like, no, 4 days ago. But
Wow.
I would drink enough where I had alcohol poisoning, I don't know how many times, where I literally thought I was going to die. And it was like, I'm surprised I didn't end up in the hospital as like more than the couple of times that I did because I drank that much. I remember having to watch a friend's kids and they were little, like in diapers, and she was working, and I had alcohol poisoning so bad I couldn't
Oh
get out of the bathroom. These poor kids, good thing that like she wasn't the greatest mom, and so one kid knew how to take care of them, but I was in so much thing. I was waiting for her to get home, and I was just felt like crap because I was like, I did this to myself.
no. Hmm.
But at the same time, it was like I felt like I had no control. I felt like no matter how many times I said I'm not going to do it, I would do it. And it was like, what is wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? And everybody used to always tell me, you're an alcoholic and you can't just have one and you need to get off it. You're allergic to it and all of these things.
Hmm.
None of those things what I wanted to hear at all. I never wanted to
Yeah.
hear that at age 18, 19, that I'll never be able to drink again. Like, are you kidding me? That's not what I want to hear. And so
Yeah.
all of those things just deterred me from actually going and getting help, because that's not what I wanted. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until I realized like I can have best of both worlds that I really was able to get a grasp on it. I tried for years, like my alcohol journey was a years and years process, and
Yeah.
it get better where it wasn't everyday drinking, it was binge drinking, but I couldn't get out of that binge drinking. Like that happened
Mhm.
just as many years as the everyday drinking.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it was like 15 years or something that this shit went on until I was like, okay, like now I know I'm in control. This is what's going on. And then like things started to happen for me.
What did it take for you to get there? What was your like aha moment?
My aha moment was that I'm the one who is in control. It's not the alcohol, it's not the bar, it's not my friends, and that I can have both worlds. Other people are doing it, and there's no special unicorn out there. There nothing makes them any more special than me. If they can do it, I
Mhm.
can do it. I just have to figure out what it is that I'm drinking. Why am I drinking right now? Like, why do I keep
Mhm.
going to it? And being willing to feel those uncomfortable feelings and not hide from them, because as soon
So
as I
you
felt
you
them,
went
I
back to the
did.
trauma and got to the core of the trauma
I
and
looked at
started dealing
exactly
with
why
it,
I was
right?
drinking, like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm having these desires, and that's because like over the years, like this is what happens. Like I made it into a habit. I made it into a habit that every time I came home from work, I would drink. I made it a habit every time it's like having a cigarette. Every time you get into the car, you light a cigarette. Every time you eat something, you light a cigarette. It becomes a habit, right? And so I
I
just,
wouldn't say so much a habit. It's more, I think, a coping mechanism.
but it's a habit.
We
It
put in
definitely turns
place
into a
coping
habit.
mechanisms for our trauma, right? So
I
yeah, it
definitely would
becomes
say
a
it turns
habit
into a
because
habit.
that's how you cope, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a habit, right? Like that's anything that we do that's a habit is because it's the way we cope, whether
Hmm.
anything, right? And so it just really looking at like my why on why I was doing it in the first place, and knowing that like I don't want to die. This is like with
Yeah.
cigarettes. Like I don't want to die, yet I am pushing myself to it with smoking cigarettes. Like that makes no sense to me. Like once I really
Hmm.
realized that the cigarette doesn't have the control over me, I have the control. I literally woke up and I haven't had a cigarette since then.
Well, we're working
I
on
won't
that,
lie.
me and my
I've had
sister.
probably had 3, 4 puffs in the last 4 years. And when I say 3, 4 puffs, I mean at 3, 4 different times in those 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, just give me one. And then that was it. And I'm like, like, and I can do that with drinking. If I want to drink,
Yeah.
I can drink. If I don't, I don't. I have it where I give myself plan dates. So
Hmm.
every my whole thing back when I first said I don't want to not ever not drink again, but I need to take control of this shit, was I want to drink, at least give myself 1 day a week to drink. And I think that came because growing up, my parents always took the weekends, and the weekends were Friday, Saturday drink days, right? Well, for my mom anyway,
Hmm.
not my ex sick, but because of his health. But I guess I always associated like weekends so I always wanted to have 1 day on the weekend that I could have drinks. And so that was my
Hmm.
plan day. Saturdays are my plan days. But I can't remember the last Saturday where I actually had a fucking drink. Like it's been years. Like on where I actually probably had a drink on a Saturday, or a full one anyway. I might have had a half of one. But for the most part, I don't even remember the last time I really had one. Like it's
Wow,
the time I
that's
actually
amazing
had
to me,
to
Jen,
drink
because like,
the summer last year.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing to me because I remember a time when your whole life was revolved around drinking.
Oh yeah. Everything was I needed to make sure I had booze, I had access to liquor, drugs, something. There was no way I was doing anything clean or sober. If I didn't have alcohol, I needed some kind of drug, and that was that. And I didn't want just marijuana. Like that wasn't good enough for me. Like I needed something. And for the longest time, it was alcohol. And there was times where I would go on benders with Coke and things like that. And with drinking like that, especially at a young age, comes a lot of like stories and a lot of experiences that you may not want to maybe have done sober, or if you had your shit together, more say, and like things that like I remember being on Jackson Square. Sorry, mom, if you're listening, but me and my friend Jackson Square, we were coming from Hess Village, I think going to a rave, if I recall correctly, and like literally just walking on Jackson Square, and two guys were there, and next thing you know, like we're literally banging on Jackson Square. Like, just why not? Like, you know what I mean? And then we literally, I remember like it was day and night. Like we literally, we were done and we just like, hey, see ya, and walked away. We didn't even know who these people were. We didn't even, I don't even think we got each other's names. It was just so up to think about, like that was like the norm back then. Like it was just stupid
Yeah.
like that. I remember, like I was just saying, the conversation about how I used to walk up and down the mountain, the side of the mountain, not the stairs, but the actual rocks and everything, in my big wedges, drunk. Like what? Like would I do that today sober as, me? No. But back then, I remember being at the side of the road and people would like just picking me up and taking me home, and I hitchhiked once from my boyfriend's house down by like Gage Park, and my mom lived by Rymel, and I was walking and walking, and finally somebody picked me up, and next thing you know, I'm in like a field. And my go-to is, you might as well say yes, we're just going to take it anyway. And so that's what I used to do. And it would be like, that would happen so many times. I'd get in a position where it's like, I can say no and fight it, and they'll just take it anyway. Or I could
Well,
just
because
give
that
it.
is how you felt when that girl did it to you.
Yeah.
And then you continued to let it happen because you were like, she's going to do it anyways. So I might as well just let it.
Yeah.
So that was your way of submitting to cope with it. Like where you just kind of numb out, right? Like you're just not there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're
And
not the first person who's done that. A lot of people, a lot of sexual assault victims and rape victims say the same thing. That's
yeah.
how they get through the molestation and the abuse.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because they tell themselves, okay, like I already okayed it in my mind.
Yeah. It gives us back the control, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like the last thing I want to do is give that guy the control. So I'll just give it to you anyway. And there was times where I was just so drunk that it was like I couldn't even say no. Like, or if I said no, it was like I was just so drunk that it'd be like, who's gonna believe me saying no like that way? I wasn't stern with my no, like
Yeah.
there's just so many different
Doesn't matter,
situations
stern
and
or
stuff,
not. No
right?
means
No,
no.
I know that, but it's just so many different situations that I had gone through and that I had done. Like I remember going to work one morning, and the customer came in and said, like, do you even remember getting home and blah blah blah? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, we found you at the side of the road and we took you home and blah 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 blah. They're like, you're lucky it was us though, because somebody else, like, and I'm like, yeah, but back then it was like it was like, well, I don't know what you want me to do about that. Like, it was like, I didn't take responsibility because to me, it wasn't my fault. It was like the booze,
Yeah.
right? And so once I really started taking responsibility for like what I was doing, and it was my responsibility, my decision to pick up the
Yeah.
bottle, to go to the beer store, to buy that booze and to drink it, no
Yeah.
matter what, it's my decision. I do have the control. And that's when things really started to change. And that's when like I
Well, yeah,
stopped
because you were
up all
finally
the time.
starting to take accountability for your
Yeah,
actions, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's when the blackout stopped. And that's, it's like, well, thank goodness. Did I can tell you right now, I don't remember majority of my life because it was blacked out. Like it was like me just living, I don't even know, really,
Yeah.
really high or really, really drunk. And so I
True.
don't remember a lot of my experiences and stuff. My brother or somebody friends will talk about something and it's like, I don't remember any of that. Like, where was I? And I'm like, you were right with us. It's like, oh, okay. And then there's things I remember that never happened. Like I remember a aunt of mine who was a nun died in my house. No, that didn't happen. But it's clear as day. I can see the chair. I can see the nut. Like, no, didn't
Maybe
happen.
it's a past life.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's just crazy. But like to me, it's like I never would have thought that I'd be where I am now. Like, I remember back in the day, my doctor saying, like, you're not gonna live like when if you keep this shit up.
Yeah.
And me just there was times where me just not caring, and then it was like, you know what, I actually do care. Like, I actually don't want to die, but yet I'm still acting like I do because I had convinced myself I did. It's like when you believe something for so long and then you just continue believing it because you haven't rethought about it, you haven't relooked at
Hmm.
it. Relook at your thoughts, people, because what you believed
Well,
3 years
you
ago or
didn't
yesterday,
really
you may not
love
believe
yourself
today.
or even like yourself at that time either. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
I think at that time you were disgusted in who you were because it was all fun and games when you were drinking, but the next day you were devastated. I remember one time coming home and you were on the couch just bawling, and I'm like, "What's wrong?" And you were just having one of those days where it's like, why do I do this to myself? Like, I'm a fucking horrible person. I'm a horrible mom. And I was always like, no, but you're not. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
not a horrible person. You're not a horrible mom. You're going through some shit right now and you'll pull it together. But like, you were really hard on yourself. So for you, I think it was easier to stay drunk or stay high than to deal with those days where you were being really hard on yourself.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I remember some like crazy shit that would happen, like people getting beat up and stuff, like all these crazy things. And it was so hard for me to just deal with any of that stuff. That it was like
Mhm.
instead of like sobering up and dealing with it, it was like let's drink some more, And then there's my binging. That's where my binging really started, was because
Mhm.
it was like, if I stop now, I have to actually deal with what's going on, and I don't want to deal with what's going on. So
Mhm.
just keep on going, right?
Exactly.
And unfortunately, there's so many people out there in this situation that doesn't need to be. And unfortunately, there's not the resources out there that there once was, or that are easy. And more people are dealing with this. More people are admitting to dealing with this stuff. And unfortunately, the resources and the staff and that haven't been able to catch up,
And
haven't been
it's
able to.
not just drugs and alcohol, Jen. Like, it's
No, it's
horrible. Like, addiction is huge right now. It's everything.
everything.
It's food.
Yeah.
It's fitness. It's like sex. It's all of it. Shopping, gambling. Like, addiction is like out of this world. I think COVID did a number on everybody because like I'm seeing people come out of the woodwork, and I don't know if maybe it's just because we're more aware of what has been going on because of COVID, but like people I never thought ever had any kind of like addiction, mental health, anything coming out of the woodwork, and I'm just like, wow,
Well,
like
I
I
think it's
would have
because
never.
COVID gave us more time. Those people who were a lot of people dealing with things in the background or weren't really dealing with
Mhm.
things. Once COVID hit, it gave up people a lot more time and a lot more time to think. And that's where the things happen, right? Once you think, you're starting to feel, and then you're starting to act.
Mhm.
For me, COVID was a blessing. I love COVID. COVID was where I was really able to strive and
Do the
thrive
work.
and really
Yeah,
get
me
my
too.
shit together. And I loved COVID. I was like, let's do this again, like,
Mhm.
because I felt like it was the best time where I was able to really focus on me and focus
Yep.
on, okay, what is causing me to feel these things? Isn't it funny, like COVID hit and now I'm feeling a little more relaxed? Well, why is that? Because I'm not feeling like I need to do things. Well, guess what? I don't need to do them anyway. I don't need to go to work.
Exactly.
I want to go to work because I want to pay
Mhm.
bills and I want to have a house and I want my kids to eat, and I want to do these things. So stop telling myself I need to. And so
Yeah.
just really learning how to talk to yourself is huge as well. And
Mhm.
so, but like a lot of the resources we even do have out there, they don't teach us this stuff. They teach us to blame the alcohol, to blame this, to blame that.
Mhm.
Even AA, like you're giving yourself the higher power away, right? To the higher power, like you're taking the control from the alcohol, now give it to this person. Like give it back to
Mhm.
yourself. And I'm
Yep.
gonna
Take
say
back your
that, and I
power.
don't care who's gonna friggin' disagree with me or not. AA works for you, that's great. But that's even one in a dime that happens. Majority of people, it doesn't work, right? And so just knowing that that's not the only option out there, that is a game changer for most people, because it
Absolutely.
gives them options, right? And everybody
Absolutely.
has options. So yeah.
And everybody's different, so everybody deals with things differently, right? Something that works for one person is not necessarily going to work for the other. We all are built differently, and we all have different degrees of trauma that we're dragging behind us, you know?
Yeah. I always say there's gonna be, like, even with like the homelessness and any
Hmm.
kind of mental health, any kind of struggle, anything, there's going to be more than one solution, because not,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? Not everything's gonna work for one person, because not
No.
everybody has the same goals. Not everybody has the same thing they want. If we all have the same goals, then yeah, probably we'd find something that works for everybody. But we all don't have the same goals. We all don't have the same experiences. We don't all have all the same thoughts and feelings and shit. And so that's why it's like, okay, we're going to have more than one solution for how we deal with homelessness, how we deal with depression, how we deal with anxiety. And that's okay too. But to sit there and not do anything, or to kind of just sit on our thumbs saying, I don't know what to do next,
Hmm.
doesn't get us anywhere. As we've noticed throughout the years, well, our homelessness problem gets worse and worse. Finally, now they're starting to say, okay, like, here are some options, and let's hope that they continue down that road.
Well, at least our mayor now is fighting for it. She's really going to bat with the federal government over it. She's declared a friggin' state of emergency finally
Yeah.
for opiate overdose, mental
Yeah.
health, and homelessness. So let's hope, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least we have somebody who's trying.
Yeah. And it's a lot of people say, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, like, let's all come together. If we all said, what am I going to do? And nobody does anything, then of course we're not going to get changes. But instead of saying, like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? Why don't you ask yourself, like, what am I going to do? Like, what
What
can I do? What
can
will
you do?
I do? What will I do?
Hmm.
What will I do? Because even if just one person will make a difference, of course, that's the way. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
then when you add it all together and we
And
bring
there's
us
strength
together,
in numbers.
the
Like,
numbers,
people have to
exactly.
learn to come together and know that they're not alone, right? Like, there are so many people. There are more people out there like us than not. We
I
just
think
need to, like, band together. We need to organize, and that's how things change.
I think that every single human has some sort of addiction, they buffer on something,
Mhm.
they have some sort of mental health issue. And I say that because a lot of times I believe we're diagnosed with shit that we don't have. I
Yeah.
was diagnosed with bipolar. I was diagnosed with borderline. I was diagnosed with anxiety. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with so many things. And I'll tell you right now,
Yeah.
I don't think I have any of that shit. I think I have some thoughts and I have some
Yeah.
feelings and I need to process and connect and work through.
Exactly.
And then
And you
guess
need
what?
to
Now
give
I feel
yourself the
better.
grace to process
And now
those
I feel
things.
better. Not the medication, not this blaming
Yeah.
the past, not this poor me shit. It was, you know what I mean? And I think that,
Processing
and a
it.
lot of people are going to be like, what the hell are you saying? You're going to say that there's no such thing as depression. There's no such, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Hmm.
for the most part, if we actually sat down and talked with somebody and told people how life really does work, that, these outside factors aren't the cause of us having our feelings being hurt, then we could take back a lot of our control, and you'll see a lot of people's mental health getting better without the
Hmm.
medication and without the, all of
Yeah.
that. So that is, and I'll stand by that for till the day I die, because
Hmm.
that's just the way it goes for me. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
But a
Like
lot of that also, like, it stems from childhood trauma, so they have to really, like, want to do the work and dig and go back into that childhood trauma and feel it and release it. You got to feel it to heal it. And people are avoiding the feeling, the healing, the moving through. And that's why they're taking, even, like, I hate to even say this because, like, I do take medication, you know what I mean? But I think they're using medication as a buffer as well. Like, oh, just give me the meds and take it all away, because they're refusing to do the work. And believe me, I've been doing the work for the last 5 years. Like, it's not fucking easy. It's dark, it's painful, and it's ugly. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You just
The
have to be
medication
willing to
just
go
masks
there.
the medication just masks the symptoms, right? Like that's not getting down to what the problem is. The problem is you got some thoughts going on that you need to work on. You have some things going on. A lot of people who are depressed is because they are using their past as a way to control their present current
Absolutely.
state. And they don't need to be, because number one, your past doesn't control it, right? Your past
Hmm.
is the past. Right now, as of your current state, all your past is a bunch of your thoughts. That's all it is. Same with the future. The future right now is just a bunch of your thoughts. And you
Well,
can
they
make
say
or
depression is living in the
reinvent
past,
depressant. I
anxiety is living
that.
in the
Yeah,
future. So
exactly.
we have to live in the moment.
And so just knowing that. And so yeah, so I've talked enough about me and my lovely, lovely mental issues and stuff. And I just it I just want people to know that like you're not alone. And even the whole label thing, like I am not one that likes the whole label
I
thing.
don't like
I
the
think
labels either.
everybody wants to be labeled, because then what, now you have an excuse for why you behave this way or
I
you
know.
feel this way or whatever the case may be. And it's like the medication, it's a mask. Like labels is just a mask to me. And
Yeah.
like fuck the label, right? Like what if there is no label for what's going on with you? What if the label is you're human and you just need to work
Have
out some of your
emotions.
thoughts and have emotions
Exactly.
and being willing to feel, because that is the majority of our problems.
Of
Majority.
course. But we
And
were all raised in this time and society where like feeling is a weakness, crying is a weakness. Like,
mhm.
you know what I mean? Being emotional is a weakness, but it's not. We are emotional beings.
Yeah, well, it's like
That is
growing
what
up.
we are.
It's like growing up. How many times did your mom say, don't say that to your brother, you're going to hurt his feelings? Or don't say
Mhm.
that to Izzy, you're going to hurt her feelings? Or,
Mhm.
well, no, we can't hurt each other's feelings. So just teaching our kids that alone, words are words. It's what we want to make them. It's whether we
Mhm.
want to give them any control over us or not. Teaching our kids that kind of stuff. When our kids are acting out and yelling and are upset, instead of telling them, stop being upset, stop doing that, why don't you talk to them and say, like, what
I
do you
refuse
right
to.
now? What are you
I
thinking
ask my
about?
son,
Blah, blah,
what
blah.
what's going
You
on?
know what I mean? If they want to go yell and scream, let them yell and scream for a few minutes. And then, okay, let's work through that. Instead
Yep.
of saying, don't feel that, don't do that. No, why? Why are you telling them that? Because you know what?
I
Most
know.
of us adults yell, scream, cry. So why are you telling your kid not to?
Exactly.
It's human, right? We're
Exactly.
human,
Hmm.
so it's like, yeah.
And the whole like boys don't cry thing, boys don't have emotions thing, like I don't I don't buy into that shit. I
Yeah,
tell my son all the time, if something is upsetting you, you're allowed to have feelings.
yeah,
If he cries, I don't say, "Oh, stop crying, you're a boy." No. What's bothering you, bud? What's going on? How can mom help?
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
not raising another man who doesn't know how to show emotion,
that's when
because
we get
that's where
into
the
trouble.
aggressiveness and the drug addiction and the alcohol addiction come into play.
Yeah, that's how we get into trouble. Not willing to
Mhm.
feel, and not willing to do the work. If you're willing to do the
Exactly.
work, if you're willing to do the work and willing to take the time and know that it's going to take some time and practice, then you're golden. But if you're not
And you
willing to
know
do
how
it, then
hard
you're
it
going
is
to
to
stay
do
stuck.
that, because as a coach, you know as well as I do. We get those fucking story fondlers, man, that they just will give you any story because
Yeah,
they don't want to do the work, because they're so terrified of the pain. But I tell them already, I like, you lived through it already. You lived through it. You survived. You didn't die.
yeah.
So why can't you just feel the emotions you're having around it and then release it? Because you are creating your own suffering every day by holding on to that and trying to avoid it, but it's causing suffering.
a lot of times I think we have these, like our minds, they like to mix up all the facts and our thoughts, right, together. And so a lot of times we will think something and just automatically think it's a fact. And so therefore, if it's a fact, we can't control that. So therefore we're doomed. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, what it really isn't even a fact, it's a thought. And so we can change those and figure those things out. You know what I mean? And so that's where the people being stuck is they're just not even really looking at their own minds and what's going on in there. Our brains give us like 60,000 thoughts a day or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And like majority of those are lies. Like majority of those are just, you know, and a lot of times we think that we're telling facts and they're not facts, you know what I mean? And just being able to really go in through that work, you know, and like you said, it's not an overnight process, but as long as you're willing to feel the feelings and be committed and knowing that like if when you come on the other end, you're gonna be a whole bigger person than you are now. Like why not do it?
I always tell my clients, coaches rules, you gotta feel it to heal it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like coaches rule, like that's my number one rule with my clients. You gotta feel it to heal it. So like, are we ready to get to work, or are you just gonna bumble fucking storytell for the next 3 sessions? Because I'll take your money.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna benefit from our interaction. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Take back your own control. Stop giving it to the people in your life. Stop giving it to the alcohol. Stop giving it to your label or your diagnosis, because none of that has the control over you, you know? And so that's just that. But we got to wrap this up because our viewers in that are probably like going, get on with it already.
I just want to say one thing though, Jen, like I've seen where you were and I know where you are now. And I want you to know that I am so unbelievably proud of you. Like you have flourished into, like you were always a beautiful person. I always saw that in you, but like just like the strength and the care that you take for yourself, I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. That means a lot. It really does. Because, you know, even though it's like I see it, it's sometimes I wonder if other people see it. And then it's like you meet people and it's like, if you only knew me back then, you know, like you'd be motherfucking proud of me. Like you'd be surprised, you know?
Well, I am motherfucking proud of you. And I know my brother would be proud of you too, Jen.
Thank you. That means a lot. It really does. I love you guys. You guys will, you know, always be family to me.
We're family, yep.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, hopefully like us doing these docu-series and that we can get the awareness out there and get some things changed so that not people have to suffer when they don't need to be suffering. And they don't have to be, you know, paying an arm and a leg in order to get the help that they need to get and wait a year or two either, because that's just bullshit.
Yeah, those wait times,
they're crucial.
Waiting lists and stuff, they're horrible right now.
Yeah. And so we need to get those changed. And so for anybody listening out there, if you have a story and you want it to be heard, reach out to us. If you have a idea, reach out to us. Anything, we want to get awareness out there. We want to get changes made. Okay. Isabel is hosting a memorial walk, say his name, on Sunday, August 13th at 11 a.m. We're going to start across the street of the emergency room of St. Joseph's Hospital on James Street in Hamilton. The address, I believe, is 232 James Street, and there's a walk-in clinic there. There's a walk-in clinic. There is a driveway, parking lot thingamaboggy. So that's where we will meet. We will walk around the hospital. We will end at no, we won't. We will end at City Hall. Yes, at the front steps. And we're going to celebrate all of those that we've lost. We're going to remember Barry, Isabel's brother, who this is in, you know, memorial awareness, remembering for. And we'll, you know, just kind of celebrate and talk and chat. We'll have pizza, we'll have cupcakes and treats, and just share each other's stories and, you know, ideas with one another. Like we said, strength is in numbers. So come out. You guys are all welcome. And that's it for me. Anything for you, Isabel?
That's everything.
Awesome. Awesome, guys. Thank you for coming out. We love you all as always, and we'll see you next time.